Darren Grimes still with me, Director of Reasons UK, Conservative channel. Darren, let's just talk about, just quickly, about the travel rules. As I was talking with George Lomonosov just earlier, Germany is going to ease their travel rules. It does seem a lot of the countries in the European Union, which are not in as good a state as we are in terms of current death rates. Germany, though, has been one of the most successful countries. I think everyone's been yet to identify why they have been so successful, given their strong sort of travel links and industrial links with so many other countries and being where they are geographically. But they're going to relax their rules. So if you've had a vaccine, you don't have to take tests or quarantine, regardless of where you come from and the like. Whereas this country, we are still treating people as if they are just as capable of getting the virus and transmitting the virus, whether they've had the vaccine or not. I'm still confused by why the government seems to be the only people that don't think that the vaccines work.
Yeah, and this idea that actually the Prime Minister even said this himself, that actually it's not down to the vaccine rollout scheme, the success of the vaccine rollout scheme in this country, that's responsible for the massive drop in cases and indeed in hospitalizations, which is what matters, right? Ultimately, hospitalizations and all else. And there seems to be this just sort of constant fear that actually what's going to happen is there's going to be some variant that is entirely resistant to the vaccine, which I'm not sure there's any evidence for right now.
No, every single variant we're told that's going to be what happens, and every single variant we discover very soon that no, the vaccine works. It may not work, it's sort of 95%, it's just 93%. Well, I'm sorry, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And that's clearly what Germany's doing. That's clearly what countries around the world are doing. That's clearly what's happened in Israel. Why are we not following suit with those? We seem to be living in fear in this country, scared of our own shadow. And that's not a position to be in.
Absolutely. And again, it's just untenable for life. And again, we've been living with flu for many millennia, and flu strains, the new mutant strains that the vaccine doesn't necessarily work on, come about really pretty regularly. And yet we don't say, well, we'll just stay closed down and locked down the entire time just in case one of those happens. And again, as we were discussing with Sunitra Gupta earlier, is locking down the answer to the problem with a variant of that the vaccine doesn't work so well on. Darren, I am so against sort of mandatory vaccines, and again, we don't not talk about pulling people onto the floor and jabbing them with the needle. We are talking about people losing their jobs or having to show, if you have to show a passport, your vaccine passport to get into a nightclub or to a supermarket or to go and get a job, and then that is, to all intents and purposes, mandatory. But I'm opposed to that on principle and in practice. I think it goes against everything that we believe in this country. I do struggle at the idea that someone can claim to be in the caring profession, to work in a hospital or work in a care home with frail, vulnerable people highly at risk of COVID, and to not get the COVID vaccine. No, I really struggle with that idea.
I mean, ethically, I'm definitely vehemently opposed to people losing their jobs over that sort of thing. I mean, we have read reports from people saying, well, actually, I'd quite like to fall pregnant later this year, or something like that, who are deeply concerned about having the vaccine. Now that the doctor that we've just heard from there, esteemed, I'm sure he is, he says himself that actually there's nothing. As far as pregnancy is concerned, there aren't seem to be any risks. But I imagine that for a lot of people, Julia, there is a real fear and uncertainty there because it is a relatively new vaccine.
Well, exactly. We had the situation in my own family, my sister having the vaccine actually while she was breastfeeding, my sister-in-law pregnant and just about to hit that age group of people getting the vaccine. But the thing is, I think this vaccine is as safe as most vaccines are. The reality is not all, there are risks for any vaccine or any treatment at all. But the point is, and the studies showing that, yes, being pregnant might be a higher risk for COVID. I wonder if a lot of that might be weight-related rather than pregnancy-related, personally. But again, I'm not pretending I know about that. I'm not making any claims, just asking questions. But we can't possibly know the long-term impact of the vaccines on babies because we haven't had them for long enough. So I would be, if I were pregnant, I would be incredibly hesitant about getting the vaccine if I wasn't in a high-risk category.
Yeah, exactly. So I do have sympathy for people who take that position and have that view. I'm so opposed to this idea. I just think there are so many ways in which we are creeping slowly but surely into this sort of authoritarianism that I find goes totally against Britain's values and character.
And yet, if you've got, I said my aunt was in a care home. Would I want her to, she's got very, very low immunity anyway, would I want her being cared for, in inverted commas, by people who have said for no medical reason that just not getting the vaccine? Because it seems to me, okay, there are people who are, conscientious objectors. A lot of people are just don't really understand it, or I don't want to have a vaccine. I mean, these same people, don't get their kids MMR'd when the evidence of that is unbelievably incontrovertibly clear. So I got to be honest, I'd have a serious issue with someone working in a care home with vulnerable elderly people who haven't had a vaccine. I'm not entirely sure they're people I want working in a care home.
Yeah, I mean, you would say, well, why don't we just ensure that everyone elderly and vulnerable has had the vaccine
But it
themselves,
doesn't,
and then they are protected?
but it doesn't protect every single person. And we know that the older and more frail you are, the more the less protection you get, because your immunity isn't triggered in the same way by a vaccine. And we also know there'll be people who are so frail and elderly it's dangerous to give them the vaccine, and they won't be given the vaccine because of that. I think on balance, I would argue that there needs to be compulsory certainly in care homes and frontline hospitals. But I don't feel comfortable saying that.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're not going to get to that point, though, are we? If people are genuinely terrified of it, unless we, I don't know, pin people down and jab them in the arm, because actually there's a crisis in this country when it comes to social care,
Yeah.
and we don't have enough people to go around as it is.
You're right. We may end up in a situation, in particular in the areas which most have that problem, that actually you lose a lot of those staff, or you're not going to replace them. You may actually cause more damage and hurt to people. It's a very difficult one. But these are ethical debates that our country needs to have. Darren Grimes is Director of Reason UK. Now, look, you're a Conservative openly. And it's interesting just to hear Kim. I've known Kim for many years, and it's lovely to hear that honesty. And when he talked about, Labour has become the party that criticises Britain, and I do think that more than anything is the thing that really just does not chime with ordinary people. This sort of like everyone's a victim because they're a woman, or because they're black or Asian, or because they're working class, or whatever. Everyone's a victim. And actually, that's not how most people in this country feel. Most people have quite nice lives.
And actually, I was more struck by what Kim said about the Labour Party that keeps saying, they're listening to us.
Yeah.
Listening to us so intently, Julia. They've been saying this for over a decade now.
Yeah.
They dismiss concerns around immigration as being bigotry.
Yeah.
They tried everything they could to overturn Brexit, working with John Bercow, that's sort of in that what was, I think, a parliament of pygmies. And then they were bending the knee to a radical Marxist group that was involved in wanton acts of criminality. If that's listening, Julia, I'd hate to see what ignoring looks like. I honestly would.
But the key thing is, it is important to have viable political parties vying for our votes. One of the things I do think is good, break down as Red Wall see, and I think it's also good, say, the Tories having that threat from originally UKIP and then Brexit Party, Reform UK, or whoever. It's really important for there to be challenges, because everyone should be a floating voter, in my view. You may always end up voting for the Tories, or end up voting Lib Dem or Labour, whatever it is, but everyone should be a floating voter. Like, listen, is this person someone I want to run the country? Do they have the right ideas? Are they doing the right thing by the country and by my family, and starting afresh every time? And so that people in politics can't just count on your vote and discount you and say, oh, don't worry, they'll always vote for us anyway. We don't have to worry about those people. You need them to be knowing they need to count on every single vote. And that's when we get policies that actually represent what people actually want.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, up here in County Durham, the fact that Labour took people for granted for such a long time is something that you hear time and time again. Yeah. Brexit did absolute wonders in exposing that sort of contempt that the Labour Party, and to be fair, other politicians, hold for the voters that actually back them for their entire voting lives. Immigration controls, that means you're a bigot, respecting Brexit vote. No, we need to rejoin. Defending Churchill. Why? He was a racist. Yeah. 2 sexes. You're a transphobe. Yeah. All of these things, where people are told time and time again that their country and what they have in life, and what they have in life, let's not forget, is what people generations have fought and died for and built over years and years, isn't worth a damn. And the Labour Party's voters, one-time loyal voters, like much of my family, turned round and said, to hell with you, I'm not voting for you anymore.
It shouldn't be a surprise, should it? Well, we're going to be talking to the comedian Jeff Norcott about a lot of this as well. But he's going to be here as well in the next hour. So time for Darren to leave us. So Darren Grimes, always an absolute pleasure having your company, Director of Reason UK.